Hello and welcome back. This is Algebra I Section 1.2. Today we are going to go over Section 1.2, which is adding and subtracting real numbers. So adding and subtracting real numbers. Now, by now you should know how to add and subtract, but we're going to throw a curveball your way. We're going to be looking at numbers that are not always integers, not numbers that are not always positive integers. We're going to be looking at negative numbers. So the way we look at addition and subtraction is really they're the same thing. Adding and subtracting are the same thing. I will give you an example. If we're looking at a number line, which Mr. O'Neill cannot draw a straight line because if he did, the world would instantly end. So here we go. Here is our semi-straight number line. On the semi-straight number line, we have an origin point that we call 0. And then from there, we have little markers going to the right. And each one of these little tick marks represents an equal distance of an integer. This one would be 1, and then 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. And then going the other direction, we still have little tick marks. And they're all equidistant from each other, all equally spaced, except that instead of them being positive numbers going to the right, because, hey, when you're right, you're pretty positive. But when you're wrong, you feel a little negative. So when we go to the left, we have negative numbers. -1, -2, -3, -4, etc., etc. Now, are negative numbers bad? The answer to that question is, of course not. They are necessary. They're a necessary entity. They're just denoting the direction they're going. If you're positive, you go to the right. If you're negative, you go to the left. So when we're adding numbers, we're actually being told to move a certain distance to the left or to the right. Let's do an example really quick. If I saw 5 minus 3, we know what the answer to that is if we evaluate. It's obviously 2. But if we're looking at it on the number line, we're starting at our first number. Our first number is 5. So we start here. Here we are starting. And then it says, go to the left 3. The negative sign means go to the left, as is shown on the number line up here. So I start at 5, and then I go to the left 3 spaces. And where do we end up at? We end up at 2. So 5 minus 3 was 2. I started at 5, I ran to 2, and now I keep on running because I'm scared. I don't know why. Maybe because the guy behind me is bigger than I am. It happens a lot. So when it comes to adding numbers, it's actually just moving along the number line. Negative numbers mean go to the left. Positive numbers mean go to the right. So if I saw -3 plus 5, what would I be doing? Well, it's just like before. The first number denotes where we start. We are going to start at -3. So let's go ahead and grab our guy, and let's start at -3. And then it says move to the right 5 spaces. So I take my guy, and then I move to the right 5 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And where do I end up at? That's right, we end back up at 2. The same place that we ended the last time when we started at 5 and we went to the left 3. So this is no coincidence. It happens every time. Adding negative numbers or subtracting is the exact same thing. Next up, we have something called absolute values. And do I know their values? Well, absolutely. So looking at the absolute values, these are defined as the distance a number is from 0. Or if you really want to be math and easy, you would say from the origin. So looking at it, how does this relate to positive and negative numbers? Well, once again, we're going to draw our semi-straight wavy line. We're going to call it a number line. We'll just pretend it's a straight line. We'll have our origin in the middle, and then we'll have numbers on it. To the right are positive, to the left are negative. So we have positive to the right, negative to the left, and let's look at absolute values. The notation for absolute value are two big bars around a number. So in this case, we would be looking at the absolute value of -4. So what is the absolute value of -4? Well, first we find -4 on our number sign. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Yay! Here's -4. How far is it from 0? Well, we already kind of counted it. To get to 0, we'd move to the right 4. So it is 4 spaces to the right. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. Now, what about the absolute value of 5? Well, we'd do the same thing again. We would start at 5, and then we would say, okay, well, how far to the left do I have to go to get to 0? Well, I had to go 5 spaces to the left, so I would say the absolute value of 5 is 5. So one definition of absolute value is the distance a number is from 0, or the distance a number is from the origin. So the absolute value of 5 would be 5. The absolute value of -4 would be 4. Now a few questions for you to try on your own. What do you think the absolute value of -3 is? What do you think the absolute value of 7 is? And now, because they're our friends, I'm going to throw in some fractions. What about the absolute value of 1/2? What about the absolute value of -3/5? What do you think those guys are? Come back to class tomorrow with what you think they are. Now we have a few vocabulary words to go through. The last vocabulary word that we have is something called an additive inverse. Oh wait, this is blue. No, try black. All right, additive inverse. So what is an additive inverse? Well, an inverse is something that undoes something else. The inverse of turning something on would be turning it off. The inverse of closing a door would be opening a door. And the inverse of a baked potato would be, I don't know. I guess not everything has an inverse, but oh well. Additive inverses are the number added to a specific number that makes the expression equal to 0. Now that's Mathanese. It's difficult to see how that is related. So let's go with the more down-to-earth version. Let's use red. The more down-to-earth version is the number that turns it into 0. Again, that's not very good, so maybe an example will help. So let's go ahead and do a quick example. What do you think the additive inverse of 4 is? Well, 4 plus what gives you 0? Well, some of you would say nothing, because whenever you add, you get bigger. Not necessarily. Remember, we've got negative numbers. What about 4 plus negative 4? They cancel each other out, and they give you 0. So the additive inverse of 4 would be negative 4. What about negative 6? What's the additive inverse of that? Well, negative 6 plus what equals 0? Yep, 6. What about the additive inverse of negative 1/2? Yeah, that would be positive 1/2. What about the additive inverse of 3/2? Well, that would be negative 3/2. All of these are additive inverses of each other, because when we add the two numbers together, they go to 0. And let's see if we have anything else. Well, we do have some stuff on fractions, but we'll get to that at a later date. In the book, it does talk about opposites, but because opposites can mean so many different things in math, I try to avoid that word as much as possible, because the opposite of 1/2 could be 2, as much as it could be negative 1/2. You never know. So we're not going to go over opposite, we're just going to go over these. And in the next part of this video, or the next video, we're going to go over a little bit on how to do fractions, because fractions are friends. And it's really important that we know how to do them. All right, see you soon. Good luck and have fun.